Another year and yet another episode of whose career will Max destroy at Red Bull next season. For much of this year, especially when Yuki was struggling to get into the top 10 and Hadjar was scoring points in the RB, it seemed almost certain that Hadjar would be promoted, or in some people's eyes, demoted up into Red Bull for 2026. A decision was expected to be made after Mexico, given that Red Bull didn't want a repeat of what happened last year with the uncertainty of Checo even going into Abu Dhabi. However, we now know that absolutely nothing will be decided before Brazil, because all of a sudden even the team have no clue as to who exactly they want. What's making the decision more difficult for Red Bull is that their mindset for most of the year has been that Hadjar replacing Yuki has almost been an inevitability. However, as the car has improved recently, so has Yuki's results. Albeit, and I want to make this crystal clear, he is still nowhere near where he needs to be long term in terms of consistency and taking points away from the other front-running drivers to help Max. Yuki in the last few races has had his best result of the season of 6th in Baku, he had a double points finish in Austin, and then in Mexico he had by far his best weekend in terms of pace compared to Max. I think Yuki had his best weekend in a long time. He was very close in quali to Max. I think it was 2/10 in Q2. Today the first stint was very strong as well. 2/10, 3/10 to Max on the same very long first stint on the medium tyre. Then after, I think it's on our side. We left him out a bit longer because there was an advantage for us to do that, and we had a slightly long pit stop. So we killed a few points that he would have scored on merit. Of course, it's one of the reasons why we want to take a bit more time before we make a decision on the drivers. The frustrating thing about Mexico is that Yuki was finally closer to troubling the other top drivers. At the start of the race, when Piastri decided to do the morally right thing and not cut the corner like Leclerc did, he was then ironically punished for it when Yuki managed to overtake him into turn 2. This was the first time that Yuki was actually able to have an effect on a title rival, because he halted Piastri's progress and took him out of contention in the fight for the podium against Max late on. Yuki's reward, however, was that his race was then completely ruined by Red Bull when he was given a 12-second pit stop. Had he not had that, then he would have been in that fight with Russell and Hamilton, but instead that dropped him out of the points to P11. And now, the Yuki skeptics will rightly say that even if you look at Yuki's progress and give him the benefit of the doubt, at best he has still only been fighting for P6 during a season where we have seen Lawson finish inside of the top 5, Hadjar score a podium, Behrman in Mexico fights for the podium as well, and that is just still not good enough for the second Red Bull driver. And now, under normal circumstances, that is totally fair, and Yuki deserves to be dropped. The problem is that there is absolutely no evidence that being outstanding in the Racing Bulls will mean that you'll be able to at least replicate those results in the Red Bull, which theoretically is a faster car. If you put Hadjar in the Red Bull around Zandvoort, then he is not getting anywhere near that podium which he was able to get in the Racing Bulls. But paradoxically, if you also put Verstappen in the Racing Bulls right now, then he is also not getting anywhere near to being in title contention in that car, because it doesn't have the peak race-winning potential of the Red Bull that only he is able to access. That is why, to me, this situation is so complex. Every available metric tells us that Hadjar should and probably will get promoted because he has outperformed Yuki in what is theoretically a lesser car. But what will happen if he then also struggles in the Red Bull and gets outperformed by the drivers at RB? Isaac Hadjar has been undoubtedly the surprise of the season, and he feels like a driver that with the right development and a little bit more time could genuinely be something special in the future. He definitely has more potential than Yuki, but I don't want to get into a situation next year where the same fans that have been praising Hadjar this season as a revelation are then slating him as incompetent and slow if he is not able to perform in the Red Bull. With Hadjar, it really does feel like timing is everything, and I am not sure if the risk of promoting him for next season is actually worth it, especially if it ends up backfiring like it did for Albon and Gasly, at which point Hadjar will then have to spend another 2 or 3 years rebuilding his reputation and rebuilding his confidence in the midfield to potentially return to where he was previously, but this time as a more experienced and well-rounded driver. The thing with Red Bull is that sometimes drivers just don't have the luxury of being able to wait for the right timing, because there is always a swarm of younger drivers just waiting in the wings to step onto the ladder themselves. Arvid Lindblad, who is hotly tipped to be a future Red Bull driver, impressed everyone, including Helmut Marko, during his FP1 outing in Mexico, with the only question being, should he be promoted into F1 for 26, or do an extra year in Formula 2 and be promoted for 27? Or were he to be promoted for next season, that would create a 3-into-2 driver situation, with either Lawson or Tsunoda being left without a seat in F1 entirely, and even then, Red Bull still would not have any certainty that any of their 4 drivers outside of Max will ever be able to be a long-term teammate for Max at Red Bull. A small part of me really feels like Red Bull are still paying the price for not signing Carlos Sainz when he was available last year, and since then they've just continued to pay the price for trying to fit decent midfield drivers into a team that really needs another championship caliber driver alongside Max. And now yes, Carlos has had a shaky start to life at Williams, but we all saw in Baku that race-winning quality that he had at Ferrari is still there. And I don't think that anyone is going to argue that were he to be in that Red Bull in 2025, that he would not have more points than both Liam and Yuki combined. One thing that is certain is that 2026 represents a massive opportunity for either Yuki or Hadjar if they're able to start it in that Red Bull. When a new generation of car is introduced, it creates a reset for all of the drivers, and sometimes even a narrow window of opportunity during which both Max, but also more so the team, is figuring out how to best develop the car so that Max can turn it into a title contender. During that small window when the regulations are still very immature is when we saw Sergio Perez be closest to Max. Checo started 2022 on fire with multiple second place finishes as well as a Grand Prix win in Monaco. The moment that Red Bull outdeveloped Ferrari and gave Max a car which, in terms of performance and also driving characteristics, was able to be dominant, Checo's form immediately declined during the second half of 2022. Yuki and Isaac are not going to care about what's happened to the drivers before them because they want to be in that car and they want to grasp that opportunity during the brand new regulations. In my eyes, I still think that the best decision is continuity, with Yuki staying and having a proper preseason with the team for 2026, and Hadjar having more time to develop as a driver in the Racing Bulls. Over the past few weeks, I've also asked my followers over on Twitter about their thoughts, and just for fun, I actually sent out identical polls after Austin and Mexico to see if there would be any difference in the voting, and both times Yuki still came out as the winner for the seat over Isaac Hadjar. If Christian Horner had still been the team principal at Red Bull right now, I think that the Hadjar news might have even already been announced, because it's well known that neither Horner nor Marko were ever that keen on Yuki, hence why he was passed over for Lawson in the first place. I really do think that the arrival of Laurent Mekies, who worked with Yuki last year and Hadjar this season, has had a big effect on the decision making behind the scenes. He has seemed a lot more inclined to give the drivers as much time as they possibly can, listening to their feedback and to just let them develop, because clearly the reactionary approach over the last few years of just constant change whenever things have gone wrong has not been working and in fact has been destroying their drivers' careers. Maybe the answer is that there will never be a good enough teammate alongside Max, because Red Bull are never going to go for a Leclerc-Russell type driver to partner Max. I still think that what Red Bull will actually do is promote Hadjar for next season, because there is no denying that he deserves it, which both kind of excites and worries me in equal measure, because I'm just not sure that he's ready mentally for that environment, and especially with his lack of experience. More than anything else, I also think that there is pressure and historical pressure in terms of Red Bull's ethos to keep the Red Bull young driver production line moving, because they also need to start developing drivers like Lindblad in Formula 1 and looking for their next world champion for when Max decides to leave in the very near future. Well, there you have it. Let me know all of your thoughts, and if you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.